Tuesday continues here on One News Now. I'm Charles Lejano. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration will take place in just a few hours. Bloomberg Quick Takes Tasin Rabbi explains why this inauguration might go down in history as the most unusual that the U.S. has ever seen.
Joe Biden will be taking office as the 46th President of the United States of America on January 20th. Here are 5 reasons why this might be the most out-of-the-ordinary presidential inauguration. 1. President Trump says he won't attend the inauguration. This isn't the first time a president hasn't attended his successor's inauguration, but it's definitely still unusual. The last U.S. president not to attend his successor's inauguration was Richard Nixon, who resigned following the Watergate scandal and left Washington before Gerald Ford took the oath of office. The last president to miss a regularly scheduled inauguration following an election was Woodrow Wilson, who skipped Warren G. Harding's 1921 ceremony due to health concerns. Other presidents have skipped their successors' inaugurations over political grievance, but not in recent history. John Adams declined to attend the inauguration of Thomas Jefferson after the contested election of 1800. And Andrew Jackson, who, like Trump, was impeached by the House but escaped conviction by the Senate, didn't attend the ceremony for President Ulysses S. Grant. 2. Say goodbye to the traditional festivities. Due to the pandemic, this year, the Biden team is replacing the traditional inaugural balls that have been a fixture in Washington's social scene for centuries with at-home entertainment. Tom Hanks will be hosting the 90-minute special called Celebrating America. It will air on major broadcast networks and streaming services on Wednesday. Some famous faces will be performing, like Lady Gaga, Jennifer Lopez, Demi Lovato, Justin Timberlake, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Bon Jovi. We're also saying goodbye to the inaugural parade. Where there used to be an inaugural parade that stretched from the U.S. Capitol to the White House, now President-elect Joe Biden will receive a shortened military escort to the White House. The event will be featured on television called Virtual Parade Across America, featuring musical acts, marching bands, poetry, dance troupes, and essential workers. 3. Security will be extremely high. More than 25,000 law enforcement, military, and intelligence personnel will be present during the inauguration over fears that violent extremist groups are targeting the city after the deadly insurrection on January 6th. The threats range from armed insurgents to possible attempts to plant explosive devices. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi also laid down some new rules. She will impose $5,000 to $10,000 fines for representatives who violate security screening rules. 4. There's a lot of things that will be shut down. Washington is shutting down 13 subway stations in the nation's capital, and 26 bus routes will be retoured. The federal aviation regulations are cracking down too. They said they will forego the usual warning given to violators that prohibit interference with airline flight crew and move directly to seek penalties.
Now, I want to be very clear about what this means. It means that if you disrupt a flight with threatening, intimidating, or violent behavior, you'll face a civil penalty from the FAA of up to $35,000 and possible imprisonment as well.
Airbnb is canceling all reservations during the week of the inauguration. So far, they've pulled around 5,500 DC bookings. Guests will be refunded in full, and the hosts will be reimbursed for the money they would have earned. Monuments will also be shut down. 5. Presidential letter. It is a tradition that started with Ronald Reagan, who wrote a personal note for George H.W. Bush before he left office. Ever since, the outgoing president has left a handwritten letter for the incoming president. In 1993, Bush wrote Clinton a note saying, "Your success now is our country's success. I am rooting hard for you." In 2016, Obama told Trump, "Regardless of the push and pull of daily politics, it is up to us to leave those instruments of our democracy at least as strong as we have found them." The question is, whether President Trump will also leave a letter for Joe Biden this year.
After being shaken by massive demonstrations over the past months, Washington, D.C. is bracing itself for the worst ahead of Biden's inauguration. Bloomberg's Sophia Chai gives us details in this report.
Downtown D.C. looks like a city preparing for war as officials scramble to fortify the city ahead of Biden's presidential inauguration. Law enforcement officials are really bracing for the worst-case scenario. Huge swaths of the city have been blocked off, and 25,000 National Guardsmen have been authorized to be deployed to D.C. Behind me, several National Guardsmen from Pennsylvania are manning a checkpoint on Massachusetts Avenue. There are less than 100 hours of the Trump presidency, and the city is on edge. For DC residents, journalists, shop owners, and lawmakers, this isn't just the nation's capital, but also where they live and work. It's becoming harder and harder to navigate all the road closures. Some metro stations are closed, parking garages downtown are closed, and even Capitol Bike Share has been paused temporarily in the Capitol area.
So what you're looking at here is a perimeter that's been set up around Capitol Hill.
All of a sudden, there are fences and concrete barriers going up everywhere, and armed National Guardsmen patrolling the streets. There's sirens wailing at all hours of the day. The neighborhood has really become a war zone. The inauguration was designated a national special security event, so security preparation was underway a week earlier than planned. The National Mall is where crowds usually gather to watch the inauguration, but this year it'll be fenced off and closed to the public. The DC mayor has asked that people tune in to the inauguration from the comfort of their homes. And she's asking businesses to download and display signs that say firearms are not welcome. Many downtown stores are putting up plywood and shuttering windows.
We're currently on 13th and H Street, and the streets are completely empty.
It's the latest blow for a city that has been shaken by coronavirus lockdowns and Black Lives Matter protests following the murder of George Floyd.
The most disastrous end to a presidency since Nixon's. That's how an economic historian from Stanford University describes U.S. President Donald Trump's last few weeks at the Oval Office. Let's listen in to this interview by Bloomberg Daybreak Australia.
We'll say that Donald Trump did enormous damage to his own reputation and to the reputation of his administration in the final days of that administration. And really that from the moment the election results began to go against him, Donald Trump went down a course that really we hadn't seen since the 19th century, a course of contesting the election results. Since throughout about 100 years, with the exception of the 2000 election, concessions have been relatively swift in presidential elections. And not only did Trump contest the election, not only was he a sore loser, but he went beyond the legal methods, the demands for recounts that were within his rights, and began to seek an extra legal, extra constitutional way of overturning the election result. And this is so going to overshadow the positive achievements of the administration. Yes, there were some, that I think it'll be very difficult indeed for historians to say that this was anything other than the most disastrous end to a presidency since Richard Nixon's.
You take a look at the latest approval ratings, 34%. It's historic in yet another way in terms of his deep unpopularity if you look at Gallup polls. At the same time, I'm struggling to reconcile this with the fact that almost 47% of the popular vote still went to him in the election. You spoke about just a few days after the Capitol riots about how this potentially actually brings less polarization in the US. I'm wondering how you explain that when you take a look at the numbers.
Well, I think the election result has been widely misinterpreted because I would say that the American people collectively voted for the center ground. They picked in Joe Biden, Mr. Center Ground.
Rich nations and drug makers for not upholding their promise to provide equal access to COVID-19 vaccines. WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus says it's wrong that younger and healthier adults in rich nations are getting vaccinated ahead of health workers and older people in poorer countries. He also criticized vaccine makers for dealing directly with rich nations instead of coursing doses through the COVAX facility.
I need to be blunt. The world is on the brink of a catastrophic moral failure. And the price of this failure will be paid with lives and livelihoods in the world's poorest countries. even as they speak the language of equitable access, some countries and companies continue to prioritize bilateral deals, going around COVAX, driving up prices, and attempting to jump to the front of the queue. This is wrong.
Spokesperson Margaret Harris reiterated the importance of prioritizing the inoculation of frontline health workers and the vulnerable members of society around the world, not just in first world countries.
Unless we vaccinate everyone equally all around the world, we will not end this pandemic. So we have to hold off on that sort of grab it all for myself instinct and understand that sharing it out equally, getting the highest risk groups vaccinated first around the world is critical, especially vaccinating the healthcare workers. They are the people around the world keeping us going, and we must protect them.
Russian President Vladimir Putin observes an Orthodox Christian ritual by stripping down naked and immersing himself in the freezing water of a cross-shaped pool. Putin took the icy dip to mark the Feast of the Epiphany near Moscow on Tuesday. The Russian state television broadcasted the footage of Putin removing his sheepskin coat to enter the icy waters with air temperature of negative 14 degrees Celsius. The Russian president submerged himself 3 times in front of an ice-sculpted cross. Each year on the Epiphany, Orthodox believers immerse themselves in rivers and lakes to commemorate Jesus' baptism in the River Jordan. And those are the top stories of the hour. Join us later at 1 p.m. as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on the Signal Play app. Just register for a free account at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Charles Lejano. We are One News.